Welcome to the Simplifier Podcast, where we turn complexity into clarity. I'm your host, Daniel. This episode is brought to you in partnership with TechPon. My guest for today is Luke Murphy, the founder of Waking Dreams Media. Luke is an entrepreneur and filmmaker. He helps tech companies turn complex products into simple videos customers and investors love. I like this. Turning complex stuff into easy to understand concepts. I love this. Welcome, Luke, and thank you for being here.
Yeah, delighted to be here. And I actually heard this week someone put it that like complexity is like a law of nature. You know, it grows over time no matter what. So you have to constantly be cutting it down. So hopefully there's always a job for us.
Yes, I agree with you. Yes, I love that saying from, I think Leonardo da Vinci said it. Simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. And we are both simplifiers. So I think I truly resonate with you and with what you're doing there. And we both know that you have to work really hard to make it simple. So before we start, I just wanted to ask you, what is Waking Dreams Media at the core, and what motivated you to start this company?
Yeah, so the core I think is you put the messaging well there, but it's turning complex products into simple videos that can basically give investors an idea of where a technology inside a startup is actually going over the course of a few years. So a lot of startups, they have the vision for where something is going, but the prototype, the MVP isn't necessarily there yet. So using some Hollywood magic, you can actually bring that to life. And, you know, describing something is one thing in language, but showing it to someone has a completely different meaning. And I think it allows people to truly get what you're talking about.
Mm-hmm. What would you say is the biggest challenge the tech companies are facing when they try to explain their complex products, their complex technologies to their audience?
Yeah, so it really depends on the person. So some people are coming from quite a technical background, and some even coming from an academic background and moving into a commercial space. Sometimes the very specific language that's used to describe something, when you really need to be specific in an academic setting or in a technical setting, actually lets those people down when they're trying to explain it to non-technical people or people that don't have as much domain expertise like investors.
Mm-hmm. Who are the companies that come to you to help them with explaining their complex technologies? I'm curious.
Yeah, so they're often tech startups or life science startups. So generally, the more complex or difficult the software or hardware, the more they likely need an explainer video to get it across. And some things that are just incremental improvements on things that are already exist generally don't really need an explainer video. Everyone kind of gets what an accountant is going to do for them. But if something is a brand new technology that changes the market,
Mm-hmm.
that is something that people haven't come across before, and they do need that explained to them.
Mm-hmm. Can you share a specific example? Not necessarily to mention the company name, but I think would be very interesting for our listeners to understand a real life example. An example of a company that came to you with a very complicated product, and what did you do? What was the process to help them define their messaging and to help them explain their product with the video?
Yeah, perfect. So I can go through the process, and we could probably overlay some images or photos as we're talking about. I think when you see it,
Mm-hmm.
you get a better idea. But essentially, someone will come to us, and they may have some messaging already, and they may or may not have like a marketing system already. But the two things that I try and think about up front, just before the video is created, is who is actually going to see this. So you don't want to create a video that's going to go nowhere or going to sit on a site with very little traffic. So I usually ask people, what's the funnel, what's the audience that you have a reach on at the moment, and we'll brainstorm a little bit in terms of like where could we technically put this to get eyeballs. So maybe they're going on a conference run, maybe there's a couple of group chats or email newsletters from different associations that they can connect with, that we can actually send the video when it's actually completed. And then the messaging is something that I've been working on with companies as well. But as you know, I'd love to work, get some of our clients to work with you on the messaging, given that you're an expert on that. But sometimes, the result of the video is impacted by the messaging. So it's something that I've had to do. So generally try and reduce the actual reading level of the core messaging and actually get the messaging down in the first place as well, because sometimes people have 5 or 6, different versions of the pitch, and all of them have different levels of effectiveness. So just figuring out what's the most effective one and then trying to improve that. Then figuring out what exactly makes the product special. So why would someone buy this as opposed to a number of alternatives in the market? So how do you differentiate it? So finding out what's special about the product for a specific customer, and then trying to find out who's that early adopter. So not necessarily the mainstream client, because I have some experience with launching startups as well. And when you get too many mainstream customers coming to you at the start, they're not going to be ready for beta testing or giving feedback. They just want something that works. Fair enough. They're buying a product. They want to know something that what they're buying works. But you want to try and find an audience of people that will be forgiving while you're in startup mode and in getting feedback, things like that. So we outline that audience. And then we move to the actual production part. So we try and usually think of what is the strongest element of the pitch that we can actually emphasize. So in one scenario, the founder had an amazing backstory that was the reason that they started the business. So it was really powerful. So we just literally put that in the video, and that was how the business was explained. In another scenario, the technology was a physical product, and it was hard to exactly understand the mechanism of how it works. So on the face of it, you're like, this does this, but it's like, how does this do this? So we just literally showed a use case of a customer using the product in different scenarios. So like 3 different scenarios across the 1-minute video, no voiceover, just like text in terms of the features of the product. And then that's what got the idea across. And then in terms of the editing, what we do is a mix of live action filming, we do animation, and we do motion graphics. Anything that we can do to get across how this technology is going to be used in a real scenario, or how we can use a metaphor to represent the actual technology.
So from what you're saying, the process is very similar to my process. First of all, you need to define the product positioning.
Yeah.
You need to understand what the product is, what the product does, and for whom. And you need this to be pretty clear. And once you define the product positioning, then you come up with the messaging, you build on that positioning, and then what you do is to take all these elements and integrate it into a clear concept and create that video, that explainer video that shows the technology. I want to ask you one thing. This is a challenge that I always face. I love the idea of simplifying things. I'm a big fan of this, but how do you handle this simplification process without oversimplifying things? I mean, it's very important to keep it simple, but not simplistic. I faced this challenge when you tend to oversimplify things. There is this problem that may arise that by simplifying too much the product, it will lose the value. So how do you simplify without oversimplifying? That would be very interesting.
I think it's what I found is it's talking to the actual client, because usually they know when something is too simple, and it's just the dance between the two of you, you know. So there's a push and pull of like they're probably very technical and would probably prefer the messaging to be a little bit more on the complex end, and then you are on the more, let's say, non-expert side, like you've an understanding of it, but you would prefer that the messaging is as simple as possible. And I think you kind of find a happy medium between the two. You know, two rounds of revision. You know, you show a draft of the messaging or the video or whatever it is, and they will likely just say this is missing a crucial detail that maybe someone who's not a technical expert would miss. But then it's just finding about the right language to get that same idea across, you know?
Yeah. And you mentioned something about their stories, the founder stories, the storytelling. I work also with a lot of tech founders, a lot of tech companies. Most of them, they have very sophisticated products, very sophisticated technologies, super complex, and it's truly hard to find a way to explain those technologies. But the idea is, when you have this type of product, I truly believe, this is just my opinion, storytelling helps a lot. The way I see it, a lot of tech companies, a lot of software companies, especially in their early days, early stage founder companies, they tend to focus a lot on the features, on the capabilities, which is very, very important. But they just don't tell their stories. I feel that the software industries need the software industry needs storytelling, and I'm just curious, how do you handle this? Because when you work with super technical people, they have the tendency to go very much into the technical details. How do you convince the founder? Look, it's very important for you to go out there and tell your story. How do you work in these situations?
Oh yeah, that's a good question. So I think it's just about showing them like a use case of another video that you've done, and just showing like how it actually worked generally. Yeah.
So you're just showing them, look, we had this success with these guys. They presented their story. It was amazing. And this is what convinces other founders to do the same thing.
Yeah, so like it's tough though as well, because these, if they're startups, they're new companies, so the number of stories that they actually have, unless the founder has a story, is actually quite low. So like a company that's 20 or 30 years old probably has some amazing stories, stories from customers, stories internally, stories about the history of the business. But a new company is going to have less. So then I think it's about constructing a story. How is your customer going to use this, and what value are they going to get from it? And you can tell a story there of before and after, and put that in a video.
I'm curious, when you build these videos, do you start with, I don't know, you know that you need to build a video for YouTube, for example, or you need to build a video that will do very, very good on Facebook, or you need to build a video that would be highly successful on LinkedIn. How is it the process behind?
That's a good question. So you have to consider those things from the very beginning in production. So a lot of cameras now will actually have a guide or grid lines. So even if let's say this is going to get a little bit technical, but the shooting format is, let's say, 16:9. So like what most people are used to with horizontal footage. You'll get a guideline over that'll show a different aspect ratio. So like maybe a square. So then you know that everything you're shooting is within the actual guidelines of the platform. So that's the technical side of just making sure that what you're actually shooting, you can effectively show on different platforms. But then there's the cultural side of things, and every platform has its like cultural nuances. And like I don't have a great answer from that, other than like you do need a creator that is experienced in that platform and the nuances of it. So you develop, I think, taste over time, having watched thousands of videos. And at this point, I've seen thousands of explainer videos from different companies and different platforms. You know, I like even looking at like a venture capital firm and going through all of their clients and seeing, you know, which ones have videos, which ones don't. I find that stuff interesting, and I think that is a challenge, especially when business owners go and they try to make content themselves, and they just can't see sometimes why something isn't good. They just don't have that taste from having seen thousands of videos, you know, before. So I would say, like, you know, to any of the clients I work with, that the biggest platforms that we would crave for are websites and LinkedIn, because that is the I have most exposure to kind of like B2B style videos, whereas B2C is not the strongest domain, you know, because there's a whole different language for those type of videos.
So you're only creating videos for B2B companies?
Mostly, yeah, that is the majority, yeah. Yeah.
What would you say are the biggest differences between B2B and B2C when it comes to content creation? I'm just curious.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, there are different considerations. I think generally they're going to want different things. But I think the biggest thing is actually the size of the audience that you need to reach and how you'll use them. So in a B2B audience, the way you'll reach the customers is going to be different. You know, you're going to likely email them, or you're going to likely, let's say you're going to more likely go to a one-to-one type
When you're in
distribution.
B2B, when
Yeah,
you're in
yeah.
B2B.
Whereas you just can't do that with B2C. So I think I think those kind of like audience dynamics changes the type of content that you're actually going to make then. So you have to be really broad, really general a lot of the times with B2C content. And it has to almost always focus on, you know, being entertaining, or being something that is going to go viral. It's just it's a very different way of creating compared to B2B. Now, it's people at the end of the day, so, you know, everyone likes humor, you know, but I do think there is a difference because of how many people you need to reach, and then the type of decisions those people are actually making.
Let's stick to B2B, and I have a question. What do you see? What are the biggest mistakes that companies make when they try to create their own content? Because they may think they know how to do this, or they may lack the budget to do it, and they decide to do it themselves. What are the biggest mistakes that people make when they try to create their own videos explaining their products?
That's a good question. So, biggest mistakes, I would say that the content is often a trickle down from other bigger creators a lot of the time. So what I've started doing recently that has generated more engagement for me personally is just looking back at the last week, 2 weeks in my calendar, and trying to write content based on those real experiences rather than concepts and ideas. And then trying to bring customer insights into the content as well. So actually talking to customers. So like outside of the production elements, I think the production elements are often secondary in terms of performance. But I think based on just the content itself, I think people don't differentiate their content. It's too shallow. It's insights everyone's seen before, and like that's just, that's a problem for everyone. We all to a degree lack the ability to create an extremely novel insight that's going to go viral. So it's getting better at that over time, I think. Which I think just comes from repetitions as well. You kind of have to write 100, 200 generic posts to start getting into the deeper stuff. Authors in general develop depth across their lifetime. It doesn't come at the start necessarily. And I think, I think the incentives of content creation for business are kind of off in a way. It's people that don't actually love creating content doing it to try for marketing to make money. Whereas, people, like the chances that if someone is writing something for fiction, that they'll slowly get better over time because it's just what they love, is much more likely than a business owner who's trying to just, as efficiently as possible, get eyeballs. So I think it's not the right channel for everyone. If you don't like writing, if you don't like talking, if you don't like thinking about like the topics that your business deals with, then I think it's not the right platform, unless you can hire someone that does.
So it's basically a sea of sameness. Everybody talks the same, says the same thing. It's so hard to differentiate in this sea of sameness. But you said something about creating the type of content that goes viral. If you're in B2B, so for example, do you think you have a complex product, you have a complex technology, you go out there, you create content, whether it's text or video. Do you think you need to go viral to become successful, or you definitely need to make sure that your content, whether it's text or video, speaks to the right audience and sends a clear message that, look, we understand your problem, we are here, and we know how to solve it? What do you think? Should we aim for virality, or should we aim for being super relevant, straight to the point, to a very specific audience, and show them we got what you need to help you solve your issues, your challenges?
I think I've seen evidence that people with very small followings can still make sales from the content, and the right sales follow up as well. Obviously, a lot of content doesn't sell by itself; it sells through interacting with people and then kickstarting the conversations. So you definitely do not have to go viral, I don't think. And I think there's sometimes perils to going viral, in that you will attract a lot of people that aren't your ideal customer, and you'll just get tire kickers, that is what, with some of the things I've done that have gone viral, that have reached a few million people, it's often almost not worth it for how many tire kickers and things you have to wade through, versus sometimes when you just hit the right post, like some posts have 10 likes and you get one sales call out of them, so it's funny how that works. But I think I do think it's always better to go for the right audience than go for the broad audience.
I had a discussion with a very successful founder. They have almost $40 million annual recurring revenue. I had the opportunity to connect with them to a private event, and I asked this lady, so I always had this idea: you need to make things super clear, aim for clarity, be clear, not clever. This was in my mind, we need to clearly explain what we are doing. So I had this running in the back of my head every time I worked with my with my clients, I thought we need to make sure that everything is clear so people will understand it. And this lady told me, look, it's very important for people to understand what you're doing, but how do you incentivize them? How do you motivate them to take action? Because there are some elements. So, okay, people need to understand what you're doing. Becoming viral definitely helps, but what do you do to make people act? So that is something that completely changed my perception about clarity, simplicity. Okay, I still aim for clarity, I still aim for simplicity, but what I try to do right now is to make sure that with the messaging, with we clearly define the positioning, we clearly build the messaging, but how do we make people act? And I want to ask you, how do you make sure that people act after they see the videos that you create for your clients? What's the one thing that you do to encourage people to take action?
That's a good question. Yeah, and I think we've had this conversation before where I showed you an example, and we were talking about the fact that, okay, it's not simple and it's not clear, but it's kind of cool, or it just kind of has like an attitude in the writing that just makes, I think makes a lot of people like it. And so there are those differences, and I think you're really logical and you're great at getting to the core of something and making it as simple as possible. But yeah, I think that there is another side to it as well, which is using poetry and metaphor and all these type of things to actually really engage people. So with the messaging process that I normally work to, it would go from trying to make it as simple as possible first, and then trying to make it resonate afterwards. So you're not always going to get direct action from people, but what you're trying to just leave is just some residue, some emotional residue that sticks in their brain. So yeah, there's lots of things that you can do for that. And yeah, I think it's probably better to just show a picture of the list of things under than trying to list all of them. But yeah, there's probably you're just getting into emotion and culture then, and so it's really subjective. I think
What you're saying, what you're saying, what you're saying makes me question how do you measure the success of a video? How do you measure the success of a marketing campaign? It's very subjective. You may have a video with 1 million views and maybe, I don't know, 10 sales. Is it successful? Is it not successful? I don't know. You may have a post. You may have a post that goes viral on LinkedIn or, I don't know, on Twitter. You have 100,000 views, but how many sales calls did you book after that? Again, it's subjective, but I'm really curious. How do you measure the success of a video that you created? What is this? How is this measured by you or by your clients?
Yeah, so I think that there's the very objective ways of measuring it in terms of, you put a video on a landing page and you see an increase in conversion rate, and you split test that video and it improves the conversion rate again. Or, you use a certain type of creative in an ad and it brings down the cost per lead. Or, you're engaging on social media and you find that the type of content that you're creating now gets you seen by more new people outside your audience that are your ideal customer. So that would be like the metric. So, with every one of these videos or posts, 5 new ideal customers outside of your existing audience see your content and you connect with them. So those are the objective ways. Then there's just looking over the course at 2 years. Before we had this video that we used to explain to every stakeholder in the last 2 years, where was the business, and are we better off or worse off, so there's that kind of retrospective, looking back as well. But yeah, the more you dive into it, the more you realize the the objective world is extremely small. What we can actually measure, what we can actually know for certain is extremely, extremely small. And then everything outside of that is subjective perspective, so that just has to be kind of like a gut feeling.
No. Yeah, I always had this thought that the best marketing people are engineers, or at least they approach marketing with an engineering mindset, because everything needs to be measured. But the reality is that you cannot always measure the results. So I have some examples where I worked with a company. They had very unclear positioning. People didn't understand what the product is all about. And only by changing the positioning, clearly defining what the product is, they were able, after 100 and I don't know how many meetings they had with potential customers and no contract signed, after we redefined the positioning and we clearly explained what the product is, they were able to book in 3 months time span. They closed 6 enterprise clients and developed a pipeline that had another 12 or 15 enterprise clients. So only by changing something that clearly explained, we changed the positioning and we clearly explained what the product is. People understood and they decided to act, their clients. But the reality is that you cannot always measure the results. And I think this is very important for us as marketing experts to make sure we tell our clients what are the realistic expectations. We should set realistic expectations from the beginning, because otherwise with unrealistic expectations, then things won't get that good in the long run.
Yeah. Like, I'm very impressed by marketers that have an intuition for brand, because I think at the end of the day, like, it was put very well recently that, like, you build a business that's just based off a funnel. The second you turn off the ads or you turn off cold emails or whatever, nobody comes back to you because you wouldn't be missed if you were gone. And I think the brand and how much people resonate with that, it creates customer loyalty. It kind of just gives an uplift across the business that is harder to measure because of how long term the results are. So it's an area that I want to learn a lot more about. But yeah.
We're close to the end, but before we finish, I would like to ask you if you are, let's imagine that you're a tech founder, you have a very, very complex product right now. You don't have the money, you don't have the budget to work with a guy like you, but you definitely need to explain your product. You definitely need to create these explainer videos to tell people what your product, what your technology is all about. What would you do if you have this complex product? You need to showcase it to the world. You need to make a video, but you just don't have the budget to do it. How would you do it with no budget? What are the exact steps would you take that you would take to present, to explain your product with using video?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, if there is no funds at all, or no funds you can get access to, then maybe it's not the right time to do video. There's probably more important things than video in the success of your business. Like, you do just need to talk to customers early on and validate that you actually have something that works, but there are many avenues for startups, especially across Europe. I can't speak to every country, but there are essentially funds that you can access along the way from, government agencies, whether that's, 5,000, 15,000, 30,000, 80,000, 100,000, depending on the kind of level of traction that you've shown to date, and how you fill out the application process. So we would generally work with startups that are at the, let's say, pre-seed stage, so that they do have some amount of funding in to actually cover the cost of video, to then go on and try and raise a further round. or start to bring in cash flow from selling to customers.
Do you mind sharing with us, with our listeners, what are the costs associated if somebody needs and wants to work with you, or how is the process? How do you handle this?
Yeah, so right now the average project that I would work on is about €4,000, and there are some options for 2,000. I think that the 4,000 option, because of what it includes with motion graphics and animation, just means that people can visually demonstrate their product better. But yeah, so that's the pricing currently. When you get in touch, it might be different, but
Man, thank you so much for this. Before we finish, is there anything else you'd like to add to the discussion?
Yeah, so I thought about, what you were saying about, how do you actually motivate people to take action? And I think one of the parts, with a video is making the customer feel like how they're supposed to feel when they're using your product. So whatever that is it a sense of control? Whatever that feeling is, it's trying to give them that in the video. So one of the sports tech companies we worked with, it has like very upbeat, like hard, like music in it, and the cuts are fast, and it almost feels like what it feels like to be an athlete at an elite level. So it's giving them that feeling in the actual video, to be like, this is exactly what I need. This is how I want this product to change my life. That gives them, I think, the motivation then to actually act, or buy, or at least get in touch and have a chat. Yeah.
Man, that's amazing. I truly resonate with this. It's in the back of my head every time I write a piece of content, or every time I build messaging. That's amazing. I truly resonate with this. Thank you so much for being here today. Please let people know where they can find you, because most likely we will have listeners that would be interested to get in touch with you. So what's the best place to reach you?
Yeah, so the website is wakingdreamsmedia.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn at Luke K. Murphy. It's Luke K. Murphy because there is a lot of Luke Murphys, especially in Ireland. There was 7 Luke Murphys in my previous gym. So it's Luke K. Murphy. You should be able to find that on LinkedIn, and wakingdreamsmedia.com.
Amazing. So that K, it's the differentiator. Good.
Yeah, exactly. That's what makes it different. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Luke. It's been a pleasure. I wish you the best of luck with what you're doing. I think it's super useful, and we'll talk soon. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thanks, Daniel.
Thank you.